Classic arcade and classic console gaming. Today on Mikey's Lab. Hi and welcome back to the lab. If this is your first time joining us, go ahead and click that subscribe button down below to ensure that you get the latest content on science, engineering, DIY, and making. Today we have an awesome project in the lab. We're going to start the physical build of an end table with retro gaming built into it. By the end of the video today, we're going to have taken an Ikea table from their LACK series, embedded an LCD monitor, and classic arcade controls into it. We will then proceed down two different paths with two different videos. One, we will take a Raspberry Pi and install RetroPie on it and show you how to get to classic arcade gaming that way. And then on the other series, we're going to take a different processor just to show you a different way of doing this, and that the Raspberry Pi is not the only single board computer that you can use for this type of thing. We're going to go down the path with an IMX6 processor using an image created in Yocto for a base Linux installation, and we're going to bring in the retro gaming that way too. So lab code up. We're going to learn something today. So as you can see, we've stepped outside of the lab. There's just not enough floor space to work on a project that big in here. So let's take a look at everything we're going to need to complete this section of the project. The first major piece we chose was the monitor. You'll notice that we went with a standard 4x3 17-inch as opposed to the newer 16x9 widescreen. Two reasons for that. One, this is a better format for retro arcade games that were programmed in the 4x3 format, so 16:9 usually wind up with bars down the side. These are also a lot cheaper, and you can often find them for free. Some of the instructions out there for people building similar projects to ours have decased this monitor. I'm not entirely sure I want to do that yet. We'll know more when we look at the table. Okay, so let's take a look at some of the tools we're going to need. First off, we're going to need drill bits. I recommend the spade bits. You can use the hole saw bits, but the problem is you're never going to be able to use them for anything again. Everybody buys those once and they just live forever. I recommend the spade bits. You're going to need the 1 1/8 inch spade bit. That will be perfect for HAP style buttons. Now if you choose to use a different type of button, and we'll address the buttons in a couple of minutes, make sure you get a drill bit that's the right size for the collar of your button. The next big tool that we're going to use is the drill. This one is overkill. Your standard cordless drill will work just fine. This happens to be all that I have. Just about any drill out there will work. The $79, the $49 one, you can get away with just about anything here. Don't think you need a hammer drill to get through IKEA furniture. It is not made that well. Alright, so let's take a look at some of the actual game components that are involved in this build. The first and foremost one is the buttons themselves. Okay? You may be tempted to cheap out on these, and there are a lot of really cheap kits on the internet for getting your buttons, your joystick, and your encoder. These tend to be a mistake. Try to go with the brands that have been making the arcade hardware forever. I heavily recommend HAP style and authentic HAP controls. These are the ones that you experienced in the arcade when you were 7 years old. These are the ones that you're used to feeling when you're feeding quarters into a machine like they're going out of style. Spend a little extra money here, you'll wind up with a much better product at the end. This is how you and the rest of your users are going to interface this project. One other thing to note, there are two styles of buttons here. We're using the illuminated buttons. You'll notice that they have 3 wires coming off of them. This allows the button itself to light up. There are other buttons out there that are 2-wire, which will work virtually identically to how we're going to build this, but will not light up. Along with the buttons, you're going to need a joystick. There are 2 styles of joysticks that I can find out there from the days of when we were growing up as kids. There's an 8-way joystick and there's a 4-way joystick. Most of what we're going to do will be absolutely fine with a 4-way joystick. So that's what we've bought. Again, quality matters here. Buy a known name. right? If you want something that's ready to go out of the box, X Arcade is a good thing. I'll leave a link in the description. Again, HAP you can never go wrong with. I'll leave links in the description for all of this for the HAP controls as well. Now, in order to use the buttons and the joystick, we need a way to make them appear to be a keyboard to a computer. And by computer, I mean Raspberry Pi, IMX6 processor, or a full computer if you choose to use it for this project. We do that with a USB interface board. Right, the USB interface board has a USB port that will plug into our single board computer. Again, whether you use a Raspberry Pi or an IMX6 or a full computer. And it has a series of ports for the lighted buttons. You can see they're 3-wire. And a series of ports for the switches from the joystick, which are only 2-wire. We'll go into more detail when we actually start installing this. Now, we need a brain for our project. You can use a Raspberry Pi for this. Almost everybody in the world seems to use a Raspberry Pi for these things. So naturally, we're not going to. We're going to use a dev board that is based on a Freescale IMX6Q processor. So what this is this is a 1.2 gigahertz quad-core processor with a gig of RAM. There are 4 gigs of eMMC on board on this particular board, and an SD card for more expandable memory. We're going with this because I have them laying around. We're going to start off with a base Linux image. If you want to know how to get to that Linux image, you use a program called Yocto to get there. Now, Yocto is a beast. It is designed for embedded Linux environments that are going into full products. So I don't necessarily want to bring that into this project, so we're going to start from a Linux image that I've made for it. I will make the Linux image available to you, and it'll be linked in the description below. However, if you guys would feel that a Yocto tutorial would be useful, let me know and I'll do another series on it. We're going to need some painter's tape. The painter's tape, not because we're painting, right? The painter's tape because when we cut through the table itself, this will ensure that we get clean edges. And clean edges will make the product look much better out the other end. We're going to need a ruler because everything needs to be centered and everything needs to look right. Nothing will give away this table being an amateur build more than the monitor being off by ½ inch. And then last but not least, we have the table by Ikea. This particular table has been used by makers for numerous things. It happens to have the perfect dimensions to make a makeshift server rack, to make a makeshift networking rack. The legs are the perfect distance apart. Several other people have turned this into a MAME arcade table before. So there are a couple other tutorials on how to do this there. Again, they use the Raspberry Pi. We're going to do a couple things different because, as you know, in my lab, I don't just replicate other people's projects. We need to expand upon it. So let's step up away from here. Let's get this area cleaned up, and let's start the actual build. Alright, so we've cleared a lot of the other stuff out of the way to make room for the table itself. I don't know what to expect. I've never opened one of these, so this could be fun. Alright, we work with this. So it looks like the whole thing is flat packed and then flat packed again. Okay. Lots of extra cardboard to make a fort for your cat. Alright, so it looks like they gave us a hardware kit here for assembly, the 4 legs, and the tabletop itself. All we care about for the first part is going to be the tabletop itself. So what we're going to do is I'm going to unpack this, I'm going to bring the tabletop out here, and we're going to start planning the layout of where we're going to cut and how we're going to do this. Okay, now obviously when you open this up you want to be careful. You're using a sharp knife, finish on this is only so deep. The last thing we want to do is put a really big scratch in the $10 table right now. So I'm just going to cut where the cardboard is. And then it's just like unwrapping a CD. Strongest shrink wrap ever. So you know what I said about protecting the surface of the table? Apparently when Ikea packed it, they weren't so diligent. Oh well, this one's black. I can fix it with a Sharpie. Okay, so the additional hardware and the legs, I'm just going to move them out of my way for now. We'll attach them when the project is done. So the next step is going to be measuring where the monitor goes, measuring where the control panel goes, and printing the control panel layout that we have chosen for the 6-button style control panel we're using. Okay, so earlier you remember me saying that I wasn't sure if we were going to need to decase the monitor or not. Now that I've seen the actual thickness of the table, I know I'm going to have to decase the monitor. If you look, I don't know if one of the cameras will catch it very well, but when the monitor is laying flat, it is about 1/4 inch thicker than the table. So we're going to go ahead and decase the monitor as one of our first steps to make it thin enough to fit into the table comfortably. So as I said in the beginning, I wasn't sure if I was going to need to decase this monitor. We have determined in the previous clip, based off of the thickness of the table, I am certainly going to have to decase this monitor. We've already gone ahead and taken the stand off, which for most monitors is 4 screws on the back. Okay. After that, you'll notice that a lot of monitors, especially of this vintage, this one happened to be made in 2003. I'm pretty sure I have friends younger than that. They tend not to use screws. And the reason that they don't use screws is because screws cost money. They use the plastic clips that get snapped together that drive all of us crazy, because as soon as you open up the product, it's never going to go back together properly. So I noticed that there's a starting point on the bottom of the monitor here. Yours may or may not have it, and this part might vary slightly depending on what monitor you have. So just take your time, go nice and slow, go steady, and they should work out. So I'm going to start by pushing down on this tab here and popping this monitor part up and out like that. The fact that I don't want this monitor to ever go back together makes this a little easier. Okay. Usually once you get it started, you can just kind of pull all the way around, and you'll hear a lot of snapping going on. Which, if you intended to use this monitor as a monitor again with the frame intact, probably a little terrifying. Okay, so the other thing you're going to notice, a lot of monitors have a control panel on the front, and there is a little piece of, and there's a little wire that goes between that control panel and the circuitry on the back of the monitor. You're generally going to want to be careful with that, right? Because we are going to need it again. So I'm just going to flip the monitor over and take off the back piece of plastic, which should now be free. And I don't know how well the camera's going to get this, but if you see this thin wire here, that's the one I'm talking about that goes to the control panel on the front. We're probably going to need these buttons eventually, so let's keep that cable intact, as these little ribbon cables are very annoying to try and replace or fix. And it looks like it is just inserted into a pressure fit there and taped down here. Alright, so we should be able to free this panel simply by pulling this up now, and we have the panel free. Now if I bring the table over, you can see it is now actually the perfect width. I couldn't have done better if I tried for it to fit into this table itself. We'll probably use some really good black electrical tape to mask off the silver pieces when we're done, because electrical tape is good for everything except electrical connections. Alright, so the next part is to start laying out where we're going to cut and what we're going to do with the table. So give me a second to get that set up and we'll take you through that step. Okay, so now we need to plan the monitor placement and the control panel placement. We're going to do this by taking a lot of measurements and being very, very precise with this. So first measurement, the table is... Alright, so now we're going to decide the position of the monitor and the position of the control panel. First thing to take note, if we measure the table, it is precisely 55 centimeters wide. So the first thing we want to do is we want to know exactly where the center of this is. So 55 centimeters wide, that's 27.5 centimeters will be the center point of this table. So I'm going to take a little bit of tape. So what we're going to do is I'm going to take a little piece of tape. I'm going to put it in the middle of the table here. So that will give me something I can write on to mark the center of the table in. So 27.5. And we're going to go ahead and we're going to mark on the tape at that particular mark so that we know the halfway point on the table. And now that that's out of the way, I'm going to make the mark bigger. Okay. So now the next measurement that we need to know is how wide the monitor is. So the monitor at its widest part is 36.2 centimeters. Okay, so 36.2 centimeters, 18.1 on each side of center. So if we go ahead and we measure out from the center point here, 18.1 millimeters. It's right about there. I just want an approximate for the first run. I'll put some tape down and make the precise measurement in a second. Always better to measure twice. Cut once. Make a temporary mark right at that point. And we're back. I've decided to graduate from the pen to a Sharpie. Alright, so I'm just going to reset that midpoint mark, which I can now see very, very clearly. And I have the 18.1 millimeter mark over here. We can now see very clearly. So we're going to go ahead and measure out the 18.1 centimeters on the left-hand side of the center. This time I'm going to go ahead and tear the tape before I try to do this with no hands. So at 18.1 centimeters, we are right about there. Again, the first measurement is just an approximation, so I can get the tape in approximately the right spot. And then the second measurement we'd be more precise in. And 18.1. And then we'll grab our straight edge and extend that mark. Now this will probably be, I don't know why you mentioned it moment, but now is a good time to take the monitor, put it upside down on the table, lined up with the mark on one side, to make sure that when it's lined up with the mark on the other side, that the monitor is going to fit in that gap. And it is. Okay, so now we know from left to right where the monitor is going to go. But we still need to know where we're going to position it top to bottom. And that is dependent basically on where we want the control panel, right? So this is just going to be more of a feel type of a position for the vertical position of the control panel, right? And then the outside portion of the control panel I'm going to actually measure for, right, to ensure that we are centered. Again, that's imperial. So we took some measurements and we now know the appropriate placement for our control panel. Table's 55 centimeters wide. Control panel is 22 centimeters wide. That leaves us with 33 centimeters left over, which gives us 16.5 centimeters on each side. So if we take our measuring tape, measure out 16.5 approximately. We're going to do the same thing that we did with the other stuff, where I'm not smart enough to rip the tape before I start this. And we're going to approximate 16.5 from the other side too. 16.5 is approximately there. So if I put tape there. Okay. So now we'll do the precise measurements so we have lines. 16.5. And we flip to the other side. Okay, those are the 16.5 inch marks. And so we know that this has to fall between those. Okay. I'm actually going to go ahead and just cut that template a little bit. So I find the cap for this thing. There's a link in the description below to this particular one if you're looking to make a 6 to 8 button control panel. Alright, so we just verify that this seems to fit between those two marks, which it does. Right. And I'm honestly just going to kind of eyeball it where I feel the controls should be. On the vertical nature, feel is more important here than actual measurement. The actual measuring will come to the monitors part after we figure out where we want the actual control panel. So once again, line up with the marks we made for the centering. And I'm going to tape down this template. I would be very generous with the painter's tape here. You will be drilling through this, so we want to make sure that it doesn't move at all while you're working with this. Okay, so now that we know where the control panel is going to go, we can figure out the vertical centering placement of the monitor. To do that, we take our tape measure again. We measure from the top of the control panel to the other side of the table, which is 40 centimeters. And we measure the height, vertical height of the monitor, which is 39.5 centimeters, 29.5 centimeters. So we're going to grab our pen, this with 10.5 centimeters. And we need to divide by 2. Gives us 5.25 centimeters on the top and the bottom of the monitor, so that we can tape the whole thing off for the cuts that we're going to be using. Five and a quarter. Okay. So now we're going to take our painter's tape and we're going to extend all these lines around so that we have coverage over the entire area we're going to be cutting. The reason we use painter's tape for this is we want as clean of a surface after the cut as possible. And this will help prevent the enamel on this table from chipping as we cut. Okay, so as you can see, what I've done is I found the position that I wanted for the control panel, and I've started to mask out the area where the monitor is going to go. I did find the exact measurements, which I can see through this painter's tape. That's one of the reasons that I love painter's tape, because you can see straight through it. I did mask off the area where I think the cuts are going to go. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my straight edge again. I'm going to take my Sharpie. I'm going to line it up with the original marks. And we're just going to draw where we believe the cuts should go. Okay. I'll just rotate the table. Okay, so now, again, one step that many people are going to be screaming at the monitor going, well, duh. Take the monitor and make sure it fits in the hole. It's going to be a tight fit, except vertically. Or vertically, it's not a tight fit at all. So obviously our original lines for the vertical ones were off. So I'm going to position this on two lines that I'm pretty sure are good. Take a couple measurements just to make sure that they're straight to the table. Okay. Straight to the table. This is why we verify. 3 3/4. So we're just to the outside of the table, making sure we're straight with the monitor. We are. Okay, so now I'm drawing another line on the green tape. This line is the actual outline of the monitor itself, and will give us a nice, precise fit. And properly centered. Alright, so the next time we come back here, we're going to go ahead and actually start cutting into this table, which is a lot easier than you would think it is. Okay, so Ikea furniture is made with such high quality material that, according to all my sources on the internet, we should be able to cut this table with a knife. Alright, so I'm going to put a straight edge down with a metal edge to make sure that things don't jump around. We're going to take our time and we're going to go over each cut multiple times. And this one's going right through. Okay, so I'm not going to bore you to death and make you watch me cut all 4 sides of these. We'll be back in a minute with this cut out. Alright, so as you can see, we're back. We've made it through the top of the table. You can see just how well IKEA furniture is made at this point with the corrugated pieces of actual cardboard, not even wood, on the inside of this table. We did make it through. It takes about 5 passes with the utility knife, and then it is also glued down to the corrugation. So you're going to have to pry one edge up and just kind of peel it off like a band-aid. It did go the way that we thought it would go. The next step for me is to drill out the holes for the control panel. So if you give me 1 second, I'm just going to set the drill up and we're going to take care of that, and then we're going to flip this over and we're going to cut the door in the bottom for access to the control panel, and then we're going to take some of this honeycomb stuff out. Okay, so just a tip, because the sizes on these buttons tend to vary. For me, it's a 1 1/8 drill bit. Best thing to do is to take the drill bit and line it up and make sure that it is just slightly bigger than the threads of the button, right? But not as big as the ridge at the top. Otherwise, you're going to drill a hole that this isn't going to fit into. Make sure the drill's on forward when you're using good drill bits. And as always in the lab, safety first, wear eye protection. So on the template, there's 2 circles. You want the middle of the drill bit to be on the very tiniest circle in this template. Because this particular drill bit is the screw type, it grabs on tight and makes a relatively clean hole. Right, we're going to have to clean that up a little bit, but also the lip of the button will cover a lot of the bad edges that are created. This part is really freaking messy. Not exactly styrofoam messy. Any of you who know me outside of the YouTube channel know I hate styrofoam. And there's the holes for the joystick and the 8 buttons. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to clean this up now. Right, and try to smooth out some of the edges. I'm going to start taking the painter's tape off. And we'll be back in a second to cut out the corrugation stuff that we need room for. One other quick step that you can do here is to test fit the buttons into the holes. They're nice and tight, and you can see, if I can get a zoomed up shot here of this, the button covers all of the jagged edges and has a really nice tight fit to the hole. Yes, I realize that was the joystick hole, but same hole. Right, we got lots of the corrugation inside that I got to get rid of still for the control panel, but it looks like this is going to work out perfectly. Alright, so the last step or modification that we need to do to the table is not as critical as the other ones, right? But we need to cut an access hole in the bottom part of this table so that we can access the bottom part of the control panel for wiring and other things that we may need to do in the future. I've seen a lot of people put hinges on this. I will probably go a very similar way at the end product. We'll do that in the finishing stages of this this particular project. But I'm just going to roughly estimate where the beginning and the end of the control panel are. I'm going to take my straight edge like I did before. Right, leaving it metal side down to be a better guide. And again, I'm not being as precise as I was with the first one because this will be on the bottom and nobody's going to see it. We just take our time. Going over the cut a few times here until you feel the blade pop through the wood. Contrary to what a lot of people said online, if you have a Dremel, use the Dremel. Okay, and just like the other side, once I find my little screwdriver, there it is. Just going to dig into one of the cut sides and pull up. And this will give us access to where we can put the electronics underneath and give us a little door that we can create to use after to cover that access point. So don't throw this out. Okay, so the next step is to remove as much of the corrugation as we have to gain access to the areas we need to. I'm just going to take my knife again and rather violently remove the unnecessary corrugation. Actually, it appears your hands work just as well. Right, we don't want to go too crazy because the corrugation does add strength to this table, but we want to make sure that everywhere we're putting a button, for example, is nicely cleared out so that we can get the button in there and get the electronics in there. I'm actually going to put the electronics probably on one of the sides of this, so when it comes time to do that, I'll clear out more of the corrugation for that area when I'm ready to do that. But the next big one is where the monitor goes, and if you do it right, it comes out just that easily. I'm also going to clear the corrugation that's between the control panel and the monitor. Since I know the electronics are going to need wires to go in between those two areas, we might as well get it out of the way now. Alright, so now I'm just going to dry fit the monitor in place. Right, and see how this is starting to look. Wow, that is perfect. It's a nice, tight squeeze of a fit, and it really does kind of look like the monitor has always been there. A little bit of the black tape, as we suggested before, to do the finishing touches, and it will look like the monitor has always been part of this table. And we're going to start doing the next part, which is to actually wire up the button. It looks like I have 4 blue and 4 red buttons. So we take the retaining nut off of the bottom of the button. Some of these I've pre-wired, some of them I haven't. All right. Insert the button into the table through the hole we drilled. All right. I'm going to try to turn this around so you can see what I'm doing. And we take the retaining nut, put it back over top of the wire. and we just hand tighten, secure it in place. And now we do that 7 more times. Okay, as you can see, one of the issues that I'm running into is I didn't cut the access door as big as I would have liked, but I can still work with it by partially inserting the button first to give me enough room to get the retaining ring in place. And once I get a couple turns on the retaining ring, I can push the button the rest of the way down. And now I have more than enough room to screw that retaining ring down. Those buttons, if you do the same thing and you run into the same problem, make sure that the buttons that you're putting in on the side here are the ones that you've pre-wired, because you're going to have a hard time getting wires into those areas. And of course, now I don't know where the last button is. Alright, so the next step is to mount the monitor into the table. Now you'll notice that at the back of the monitor are the VESA mount points that still exist on this monitor. Now we could measure and try to figure out exactly where it is using math and 9,000 other things. I'm going to use nail polish. Alright, so what we're going to do is take some of Mrs. Mikey's nail polish. Don't tell her. And coat the 4 VESA mount studs with what I would call a liberal coating of nail polish. Okay. And then what we're going to do, always close the nail polish. And what we're going to do is we're going to take the monitor, we're going to set it in place. Try to get it close to where we want it. And I'm just going to push down on the monitor, hopefully transferring the nail polish to the backboard. I'll tip the monitor out. And as you can see, we now have 4 perfect marks for where the VESA mount holes for the monitor should go. So we're going to drill those out, and we can mount the monitor by screwing through the bottom of the table into the back of the monitor's VESA mount, so it won't go anywhere. Alright, so since we're about to drill out those holes there and use the drill again, safety first, guys. I'm just going to reach over here and grab the screws that are used in this VESA mount. And we just want to make sure we select the right size of drill bit. I believe it's going to be this one. Yep, this one should work. So we're going to go ahead and take this rather evil looking drill bit off. Alright, so now, in order to make sure that I don't drill through the carpet, we're going to put it on top of that corrugated cardboard, or any other surface you may have. And drilling through this stuff tends to be like drilling through butter, so just take it very slowly. Okay, so now that we have those holes in place, I'm going to take the monitor once more. I'm going to set it into the table. I'm going to turn it. That didn't work at all. Monitor into the table. And try to line up the first hole. Okay, now since you're going to try to line up the other holes after this, we don't want to tighten that all the way, which is why I threw the screwdriver away. Completely intentionally, I swear. Okay, line up the second hole. Of course, the last 2 holes are not perfectly aligned, but they're pretty close, so just take the screwdriver, move a bit of extra material that's in our way. It's very important to remember while you're doing all these modifications to ensure that the monitor is supported. Okay. This is always one of the bad parts about working in an apartment. Carpeted floors. That's back the way I want it. Alright. So now we need to start thinking about mounting the joystick. Right about here is where my lapel mic decided to run out of batteries, so we're just going to do a voice over here and try to catch up. We're basically looking at mounting the joystick at this point, and as you can see, I've used the metal plate, the steel plate that comes on the top of the joystick for a drill hole pattern. Again, any drill will work with this. You don't have to use the hammer drill. It literally is just the only drill that I have. So as you can see, we're just going to drill through the corner bracket holes that we're going to use to mount this particular joystick with. I did find some interesting server rack hardware that we're going to use to mount this with, kind of a homage to the type of environment that this table is going to eventually live in, which is a software development firm. As I've mentioned many times in this video, cutting through this this wood is very, very easy, so be careful. You don't want to go too crazy with this, but it definitely is an easy drill through. Alright, so obviously once you get through that, you're going to want to clean up and insert the bolts that you're going to use to secure the joystick in through the wood already at this point. We're going to try to do most of the tightening via the nuts at the back of the joystick once it's in place. We want these holes to obviously be a snug fit so that it holds onto the bolts nice and tightly already, and just ensures that you have a tight grip on the joystick. Alright, now we'll just get the fourth one put in place here. Getting them in there was a little more difficult than I anticipated. I probably could have gone one size bigger on the holes that I used, or the drill bit that I used. Okay, so now that the fourth one is in there, we can start fitting the joystick in from the back. You see that I reattached the steel plate to the joystick. And we're just kind of inserting it from the back through that door that we created. And then we're just going to secure it with some nuts that we have from that server rack kit. We're going to kind of take our time here. We're going to make sure that we get these tightened up nicely. This will take a lot of force. Depending on the type of people who are using your machine, they can try to abuse this a fair bit. So the tighter this is, the more of that steel plate is going to be in contact with the top of the table, and it's going to resist a lot more impact and handle that a little better. And of course, once that's done, it's time to put the top back on the joystick. First thing we want to do is put that little plastic O-ring type cover over top, and then we just screw the red ball onto the top of the joystick. And that will give us a nice, clean, finished look to the project. Of course, I couldn't resist in a couple of seconds here testing it out to make sure that it felt good. I really do like the pattern that I used for the buttons. it does feel like a ready-to-go table at this point. So we're going to go ahead and attach the legs to this. This table comes with 4 double-sided bolts, or not bolts, wood screws. So I'm just going to zoom in on one as I do it here, and you can see that basically I started on one side and I use that side as a wrench to do the other side. All right, and you just keep twisting until it goes up flush and it lines up perfectly with the side. This is not, there's a lot of twisting here. And then obviously once this is all done, we repeat this 3 more times. And all the legs will be attached.
Now that completes the physical build of the gaming table. We'll be back in a little bit with the electronics section.
And we're back up. So now you've seen how to build the physical table itself. In a video that will be coming up very, very shortly, we're going to show you how to embed the electronics into it. We're going to start with the Raspberry Pi because I feel that that will probably have the biggest impact for most people watching these videos. But I do also want to do the IMX6 processor as well, just to try and get people into that mental state of other devices you have can be reused for this. You'll find IMX6 processors in lots of things, including old set-top boxes that are around, and it can be a very great source of hacking and reusing old hardware.